This is Implement AI in 15 minutes, where CIOs and tech leaders share how they're turning AI from strategy into real execution.
Welcome to Implement AI in 15 minutes. Today we're here with Ivan Imana, Chief Information Officer at World Travel Inc. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
So I think we're going to have a lot of interesting things to talk about because anyone, whether in the industry or just living their lives, has a lot of touch points with travel. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest in how you see it, how personal travel differs from corporate travel. So I want to start broadly and quite simply just to kind of introduce everything. If you could tell me a little bit about your role today at World Travel and then how that's changed as the world's moving away from more, less in person and more digital, more virtual meetings.
Yeah, so my role at World Travel is Chief Information Officer, but that also does a lot with innovation. I think at the end of the day, technology has become more core business conversation than an outside part of the conversation. And how do you deliver service and efficiency, which is bottom line EBITDA, to the organization? So this is talked about a lot, but I think technology has a definite seat at the table when it comes to the senior leadership teams. And I think my role has just been involved in every aspect of the business because there's not an aspect of the business in any industry where technology doesn't touch it in some form or fashion.
That makes sense. And do you see, I guess, I'm thinking of travel the way that at least it's portrayed currently. Now we're maybe in a period, especially on the pandemic, nobody traveled and like a lot of remote work and remote meetings. But now there's this craving to go back into the office, to meet people face to face. Has that shifted at all in corporate or has it stayed consistent?
No, it's definitely shifted. So you have the aspect of where there was pent up demand for wanting to meet face to face, right? Then you had the normalization of that of, okay, we have to conduct business. I need to close a sale. I need to close a partnership. I need to make sure something gets done. And at the day, as human beings, the most effective methodology to do that is face to face, right? Now, what you have is there was a period where companies would get together because there's so many remote workers, so they would have meetups, right? Because to collaborate in a whiteboard format, Zoom or other collaboration tools are just not as effective. So, and I think now we're getting to a little normalization. A lot of organizations we deal with have, at minimum, required their employees within a certain radius to be in the office 3 days out of 5, right? Because they've got these large investments in these office spaces. Right. And to the extreme where some have said you're either moving to an office, close to an office space, or you're not going to be here. It's a large spectrum. So what I would say is travel has normalized to its new normalization. But the one thing that, if you notice at the GBT level, at the GB level as far as spend, is it's increasing year over year, and it was getting closer to its peak right before COVID. Because the world has gotten smaller and travel has enabled the world to get smaller.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess that's the other side of, technology was introduced, but also now we do business worldwide. Anybody can be a partner, anybody can be a client. That makes sense. How has AI changed your operation in the last 3 to 6 months? I know obviously we talked a little bit before that there were things that did a lot of the parts that AI do today, just labeled something else. So how has that shifted, I guess, in the last 6 months max?
I think it's shifted in a lot of ways. In the pace of movement is very fast. I think in our industry, when you think of labor and servicing, specifically when you think it's a communication, whether that's voice, whether that's chat or email, AI, as artificial intelligence has talked about today, LLM, has a very specific use case. It can bring service levels to a higher level by the fact that it can bring you to solutioning as soon as possible, or potentially actually offer you the solution, right? And so that brings into a large focus on productivity and efficiency. which is always what every company is trying to do. The more productive you are, the more profitable you are.
Right.
So that has definitely been a large focus. But I think the other piece that we're seeing right now in our industry, and I think other industries, is how to one agentic AI, I'll call an agent, talk to another third-party agentic AI, I call an agent, where now you're not just solving internally, but you're solving externally. And what does that mean? And that's moving at a very rapid pace. And I think that's going to be changing our industry, but will change other industries in a similar fashion, especially when it comes to a servicing aspect.
Right, that makes sense. And I guess you talked about productivity, which I think everyone at the end of the day, they care about the ROI, the increase in revenue or increase in productivity, which all correlate, right? What tools are you using, or what departments, or what specific tools within departments, let's say, are you using that you see some productivity shift, if any?
So we have a fairly large contact center, people that answer the phone, respond to email, respond to chat. We see the speed and how many transactions they can do in a high customer service focus. AI, we have specific AI integration into our contact center. So therefore, the ROI as to how many transactions can that staff do or be assisted in doing versus what they could do before. A very defined ROI. Other areas we're starting to see that is on the technical area of where I would spend a lot of time doing discovery work of, hey, I'm an engineer and I'm not familiar with a particular language, example, JSON versus Python, as opposed to trying to spend a lot of discovery time to understand the different verbs. Right now I can get that laid out for me, not complete, but allowing now focus on my expertise and execution of the objective. And that is also, there's a good ROI there. So those are some things that we've defined as ROIs and focused on actively, have either put in place or actively putting in place.
That makes sense. And are there, like, as you're choosing, I guess, pieces of technology or places to implement them, what are the potential drawbacks or fear on the leadership team in adopting them?
Well, there's cultural drawbacks, as there is a perception that organizations are doing this to replace labor, i.e. people, right? I would argue it's more to enable more effective services. The other aspect is, where does specifically agentic AI, LLM, fit into your goals of what you're trying to do? One of the things is there is, the bell curve, right? Where there's certain activities where you have to be in the fourth quadrant, 99.9% of the time. As fast as AI has improved in the LLM world, you're still not in that fourth quadrant for a lot of things.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So what is the activity you're doing where even if you're doing millions of transactions and you have a 1% error rate, that's actually really high.
Right.
So those are the things you have to look at as to what's the business case and what's the use cases, where do you want to focus, and where is it, transforming to and will be able to be applied in the future.
Yeah, hey, you've obviously been in the travel world for over 25 years, right?
Yeah, over 25 years. Yep, started when I was 20.
Oh wow.
No, I'm joking.
Where do you think, once the technology gets there, it would be really interesting to have some support from AI or from just the future, whatever, AGI, whatever you want to call it, the next steps?
Well, it's actively happening now. I think it's how you procure, buy travel is turning into a much more personalized, non-scripted format. And so, we talk about personalization, and there's been this journey of personalization, but I think AI gives you the opportunity to completely take it to a whole new level. For example, going from a 1.0 to 3.0 of what personalization is.
Right.
And then allowing a lot more flexibility as to how you buy travel, look up travel and how that experience is. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing in our industry, but I would say there's a lot of parallels in other industries where that focus is happening.
Yeah. I guess as a buyer and user of AI, where do you think the largest gap between what you as a customer and other customers say they want from AI versus what actually works is?
Well, I
Or
think
is there one?
well, there's a couple things. You've got the business aspect that AI as it stands today is not necessarily cheap. You have to be able to cover that cost on whatever your business case is. And you also have to have the business case where it's going to increase the service to a new level, because that is why you invest in these processes, right? And so I think, if it's an incremental change, is the ROI going to pan out for you? And there's a lot of conversation about that. I think the expectation is for the end user is that it's seamless. The service is incredibly fast and incredibly accurate. And no matter the manner I want to have that service occur. Specifically, when you think about digital, am I a person that wants to do it through an app and over chat? Or am I a person that wants to do it through email? Or am I a person that wants to talk to someone? AI applies to all those channels when you think of that in travel. Now, you have to deliver that effectively across every channel and make sure you're delivering it in a way that satisfies that end consumer in their preferred methodology and how they want that to be done.
That makes sense. We often, hear people being worried about, what's my customer going to think that they're speaking to an AI and not the person they're used to on the phone, they have a relationship with. What are your thoughts on, AI not being human or not sounding perfectly human versus the capability of delivering, let's say, larger output or larger capacity?
Well, I'll give you a parallel as I see it is when voice went over the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the human ear can discern very slight inflections. So therefore, it was very obvious that the connection wasn't the traditional connection when it first came out, right? So I think when it comes to AI as servicing is it can't be, it has to be just as the experience would be with a person. And the other thing, there has to be some thought is that you want to make sure as you're delivering the service that you're not going to solve everything. So when is it that you need that expert, whatever that is, to step in, and it has to be a very smooth transition. I think where you get some of the frustrations, particularly sometimes a bad word, a bot, is that it's an endless loop in that AI doesn't understand what you're asking, but
Right.
there's not a way to get service beyond that. That creates consumer dissatisfaction.
Yeah, 100%. We get offended when people call our agents bots.
We do.
But that's the word that some people are just used to because that's what used to exist. What's the biggest lesson that you learned around implementing AI within your industry at least?
To understand it's an iterative process, and that as the technology has moved at a very fast rate, which is fantastic, but it hasn't solved everything. And it is the other aspect, these models you have to constantly train. They will get stale if you're not paying attention to what you're looking to originally deliver. And I think that's the biggest lesson is that it's always something that you have to interact with.
That makes sense. I think there's an expectation, from everything you see on like the news and social media that it's like a one click or maybe no click, it just reads your mind and it's going to do everything exactly how you think it's going to work. Versus the reality, like you said, it takes a lot of sort of maintenance and adding new context and all these things to get it to work. All right. I want to be mindful of your time. I want to do one more question before we end. What's your bold 2026 AI prediction?
The way businesses interact with each other, i.e., partnerships and share information, is going to change dramatically, specifically with Agentic AI and MCP protocols.
Okay, one more actually, because I think this is interesting. If you had to give some feedback or advice to a company similar to yours that hasn't taken that first step into AI or thinking where it may fit, what would that advice be? Where should they start?
Well, my first advice would be that number one, it's a business, right? And so, what is the use case? Do your homework. What's the use case? What's the cost, and what's the ROI outcome you're desired for your business? That you may increase cost, but is that okay because you're going to increase sales and increase revenue, or is it a strategic objective to decrease cost? And what is that going to be? And what is the ROI on that? I think that is, the basics always apply. AI is a tool for the business, but the basics of the business always apply.
I love that. The basics of the business always apply. Ivan, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.